Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to another episode of My World of Darkness, the Thicker Than Water recap. In the last episode, we brought the characters over to Chicago and let them feel things out, but tonight was the first night of class, and it went way longer than I thought it was going to. Not the game session. The game session went on the standard amount of time that I had expected it to. I actually had intended to have the schooling part of this plotline only be about 15 or 20 minutes and have the rest of the game to run on a plotline that I was working on. But it became so important for the characters to actually play out in a class setting that the entire 4 hours of game were in class, with me playing Harker in the background, being as quiet as possible because I can't stand playing two NPCs at the same time, and me playing Critias, who was teaching them. Now, we went over the 4 rules of Elysium and why they exist in the city yet again at the beginning of the game. We did introductions and things like that. And the characters learned that Critias is, in fact, a semi-retired professor at this school at the University of Chicago, and it was interesting to. I actually had decided that I was going to be easy on the characters, very much, and just choose one small portion of kindred existence to focus each class on, and tonight's was the traditions. So I figured I'd read the 6 traditions, ask them some questions here and there about it, give them a counterpoint to the traditions, and then just leave them with that lingering in their brains, because that is another aspect that I find of Vampire the Masquerade that goes largely ignored, specifically in Anarchs and obviously in Sabbat settings. But even in Camarilla, I have noticed that the traditions are not highlighted as much as they should be, or at least as much as they used to be in games. So I actually got out 2 books. I got out my Laws of the Night. This is the 2nd edition revised Laws of the Night, and I read through them the 6 traditions in this game. And for those of you who have actually never heard the 6 traditions, or who just don't pay attention to them that much, or whatever, I will go ahead and I will go over them again right here. First tradition is Masquerade. Don't let anybody know that you're a vampire. Now, we read through the actual wordings of this, so screw it. Thou shalt not reveal thy true nature to those not of the blood. Doing so shall renounce thy claims of blood. The second tradition is the domain. Thy domain is thy concern. All others owe thee respect while in it. None may challenge thy word in thy domain. The third tradition is progeny. Thou shalt sire another, one with permission of thine elder. If thou createst another without thine elder's leave, both thou and thy progeny shalt be slain. This is actually kind of fun. The fourth tradition, the accounting. Those thou create are thine own childer. Until thy progeny shall be released, thou shalt command them in all things. Their sins are thine to endure. The fifth tradition is hospitality. Honor one another's domain. When thou comest to a foreign city, thou shalt present thyself to the one who ruleth there. Without the word of acceptance, thou art nothing. And the sixth is destruction. Thou art forbidden to destroy another of thy kind. The right of destruction belongeth only to thine elder. Only the eldest among thee shall call the blood hunt. So we actually went through those one by one, and I asked each of the players what each of them meant. Like, I read the ruling, I read the name, I asked what it meant, and then we read what the actual thing is, and then we discussed the translation and how they can be manipulated. Specifically, tradition of domain is something that can be highly manipulated, because where it does talk about the individual domains that have been gifted to you by a higher ruling party, the prince. The prince also has access to walk into your area and go, yes, but this is also mine. So that is something that is highly manipulated. Now, he went on to talk about how it's common knowledge that Raphael de Cortazon, the first Justicar of Clan Toreador, is the one who went out and said, masquerade, blah, blah, blah. Masquerade is what we need to be paying attention to. Let's hide from the humans. I explained that the Camarilla started off as a coterie of 7 kindred, and that it just exploded from there on. Now, after they had gotten a grasp of what the traditions really were, I pulled out this book, Faith and Fire. This is the LARP book for Dark Age Vampire the Masquerade. Now, the reason I decided to go ahead and pull this one out is because it also has the traditions. It has the traditions of Cain. I explained to these characters, these all neonates, mind you, I want to point that out there, that following the suggestion of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, all of our characters are around the same age range. They are, I think the eldest character in the game is probably Tinia, who has been embraced for like 20 years or so. So the majority of them are young. I might be wrong. I think Elle actually might be a little older. I think she's a 60s baby. But either way, none of them are cracking 100. But the reason I did this is because I wanted to show them that although Kindred Society claims that the vampires have been following traditions for 500 years, they have actually been following them a lot longer. And then we went over the Dark Age traditions, and I explained to them how they're different and in different orders. That the first tradition is the Covenant. Thy blood makes thee my brood, crafted in my image, my curse thine, my salvation thine. I stand before and above thee as God regent. I am the way. My traditions, covenants. Renounce me and renounce all hope. I showed them that the first tradition was to respect Cain and do not ignore him, which is something that all kindred do nowadays in the Camarilla. That the only ones who are actually acknowledging Cain's existence still are the futile, dangerous enemies in the Sabbat, and even the Anarchs ignore this. The second tradition is domain. As I am the master of Nod, thy domain is thine own concern. Thou art its master, and all will respect this or suffer thy wrath. All will present thyself when entering, and thou shalt protect them in turn. By right, thou art allowed to hunt within the bounds of thy domain, its blood thine own. Accept its responsibilities, minister thy domain, and pay others the same respect thou accepts. So in other words, domain really has not changed that much, other than the fact that it was very much more widespread at that point, because we're talking about fiefdoms and things like that. But going over that really did kind of make people go, oh. Especially Tinia, who realized that she is now in control of an entire city when she gets back to Portland. The third tradition is progeny. Thou shalt only sire another with the permission and blessing of thine elder. To create it is providence of those closest to me, for thy shalt be accountable. Breaking this, and both thee and the progeny shall be slain. Hasn't really changed much. The fourth tradition is accounting. Those thou create are thine own blood until released from thy charge. Until that moment their sins, their blood, and their punishments are thine. So I did explain to them that even in modern nights, the sire has the right to kill their child, because you can always embrace and go, oops, that was a mistake, and it's your responsibility to erase it at that point before you get in trouble for something your child does. The fifth tradition in the Dark Ages is the destruction. Forbidden art thou to spill the blood of another of thy kind who is elder. This right belongs only to the closest to me, and none other. It is forbidden for those of weaker blood to raise against their elders. This is my final covenant. So, the destruction in the Dark Ages was that you weren't allowed to kill your elders. Doesn't say anything about your peers or your youngers. Where in the modern Knights, it reverts to everybody. The sixth tradition is the silence of the blood, and this is really what got the players going. Is that if the masquerade was created 500 years ago by Raphael de Cortazan, the silence of the blood says, never shalt thou reveal thy nature to those not of the blood. Doing shall renounce thy claims of my covenant. In other words, masquerade existed, they just changed the name to make it sound more dramatic in the more modern times. Not that 500 years ago was modern. That still falls under the Dark Age timeline to me. But we spoke about those traditions, how they came about, how cities are run for 4 hours. And I could see a lot of thoughts dawning on Abilene, on Tinia's player, that she had not thought before. Maybe she had thought out of character, but was finally allowed to think about them in character. Like how she was going to run a city as large as Portland, with as many districts as Portland has. She's going to have to find lieutenants. It was a very interesting night, and I really can't go into much detail about how things happened because most of it was inside the players' heads. As much as I would have loved to have continued on with the plot line that I had planned, this one session was just so in-depth and thought-provoking. I don't think, other than when Critias spoke to them directly, I don't think Annette said one word. Because there was that sense of overhanging dread of how do you deal with something this big when you're this young and you don't have the power. I'm pretty sure that there were a few vampires who were going, this is why the Camarilla exists. These anarchs, for the most part, I know William is not technically an anarch because David plays Camarilla characters in anarch games. But I really do think, I do believe that Gabriel and Justin were both on the same page of screw it, because they still have that in-depth Sabbat mindset. But I really do see a lot of the players just sitting there, stopping and thinking. Now, I revealed this to the players, so I don't mind revealing it to you guys. But when they return to class next time, because the final topic of conversation was conclaves, was the concept that every 13 years, the kindred of the Camarilla host an event known as the Grand Conclave, and that they reassess who the Justicars are, they reassess who the Archons are, that it's an open forum to all kindred who wish to speak, no matter what sect, no matter how old, no matter what their ranking. Everybody has the floor. Everybody has the ability to speak, as long as they're polite and have the ability to actually communicate in a fair fashion. Because they were discussing how you would run a city, and asking Critias what exactly they would do. And he said Grecian model politics. He said democracy, voting was the right way to go, because even slaves in ancient Greece had the right to vote. Women didn't, unless you were in Sparta. But slaves actually had a right to vote. That's incredible. Everyone had a voice. And he said that the way that you should run a city is the same way that Greece ran. That it needs to be done like that, and to keep things well balanced and everyone to be heard. but to also make judgments. Critias also went over who the current Justicars are of the clans. And when Tinia heard that Juliet Parr was Justicar of Clan Malkavian, a little bit of that London memory popped in when she was living through Tony, the Brujah's life, last days, last nights on existence, and spoke with Juliet Parr. Now, they also went over the fact that Lucindy is Justicar for life for Clan Ventru. And some of them were thinking how unfair that is, but if the Ventru voted on it, if the Ventru decided that she was the one who was going to pave the path for their clan, that's their right to do. Critias also let them all know that Lucindy is in Chicago from time to time, that she has a vested interest in Kevin Jackson's rulership, his praxis. And Tinia thought this would be a good chance to speak with her, to speak with the Justicar of Clan Ventru, because she's also involved in the machinations of what's going on in Portland. Critias at this point does explain to Tinia that perhaps it's a good idea to wait until the next conclave, which is in 3 years. They have 3 years to prep themselves to go in there and be treated with respect among the Camarilla, to show them what Portland can do, how Portland can be run, possibly give the world a new model of how things can be run. And that's when Critias explains that there is a new model being formed in Portland. That this city is going to be opened up with an embassy to the Camarilla, but not be run by the Camarilla. It's going to allow kindred to have the protection of the Camarilla, but it's going to allow the idea of ruling factors by the anarchs. They're going to have a little room, so to speak. Critias asks the class, do you know what the Camarilla means? And he's not being existential, and he's not looking for deeper meaning. He's like, do you know what the word Camarilla means? Do you know what the definition of the word Camarilla is? And he says, little room. That they started off as a coterie of 7 kindred, one from each of the pillar clans of the foundation of the Camarilla. And then they opened the doors to everyone. Lucindy has an idea. And again, this is my plotline. This does nothing to do with the overall canon. This is my idea that I got talking with a friend of mine over a game of Blood Hunt, who said that he likes the idea of the Camarilla as an elitist club. And it just got my brain turning on that one, with the idea of what if they were? What if you did have to do, as he put it, prove yourself to the Camarilla to join the Camarilla? It really fits with the way that V5 has them set as this elitist group run by Ancilli at this point in time. A few elders, but mostly Ancilli. So Critias explains that when they return, there's going to be an embassy. There's going to be a Camarilla power, but they are going to have a laissez-faire act, a hands-off act, when it comes to the way the city itself is run. They are going to handle things for themselves. And the Camarilla is going to leave the anarchs to their own devices. This is called Project Little Room. And I can't wait to see how that comes out. Now, what I was going to say is since I already told the players this, and I'm letting you in on it now, when they return next week to the class, they're going to find a note taped to the door that tells them to go into a room down in the basement. When they get down there, they're going to find a table with chairs where they can all sit and discuss, because the class is now going to be set as a conclave, that they are all going to get equal say in what's going on, and they each have to make up their own mind about things. And it's going to be a little weird since there's like 3 gangrel at this point in time, but it's the model of what the conclave is supposed to be. Now, he also gave them some homework. Read up as much mundane information you can on the Inquisition, because the next class, that is what we are covering. He wants them to have a good idea, a good grasp on reality of what the Inquisition was, so that he can tell them what happened in the kindred world. And that's where we left off. That is the plot line that we are in, and I cannot wait to see how this goes, because we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper into more kindred stuff. Now, hopefully we can actually get out of the classroom at times. I think I'm actually going to start next game session off in mid-session, so that they have a chance to discuss things, but I can end the class, so we can actually do some stuff, because as fun as this was, I want to get them more involved in what's going on. Possibly create a debate team on the way things are going to be run. Maybe split the class up between you guys represent the Camarilla, you guys represent the Anarchs, and we're going to go head to head to see how this works. But I am Voivode Maquette, and this has been a look into my world of darkness with the Chronicle Thicker Than Water. And I'm interested in knowing what you guys think about this, because I really like the stories where the game LARPs out, where it turns into live action roleplay because the characters are all just sitting around talking. I prefer going on nights where there's barely any dice rolls and things like that. It really does bring me back to my roots as a LARPer, both storyteller and player. But thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Good evening.